Yeah, I'm just going to analyse a game between Vassyl Ivanchuk, known as Chucky, and Alexi Shirov. The game's played in Wijk B tournament when they were both fairly young before they'd qualified for the A tournament. They're both known for their exciting and attacking play. Alexei Shirov is known as fire on board. Chucky Ivanchuk, is a great attacking player. And in this game, they play a long and fairly complicated theoretical variation in the anti-Moran gambit, and then suddenly Chucky comes with a unexpected sacrifice that, you know, I've known the game for years, I've loved the game for years. I analysed it in Norwegian yesterday, and even although I've loved the game for years, I know it well, and I've studied it much over the past few days, I'm stunned when I see what happens. I just think, can that possibly be right? But it works perfectly for Chucky. So let's see what happens. D4, D5, knight, bishop, pawn C4, C6, the Slav defense. Comes with a knight. So far, everything's, comes with a knight as well, everything's directed at D5. This is and isn't directed at D5. It's complicated to explain why. That's E6, the semi-Slav. And bishop G5, the anti-Moran gambit. The Moran and Moran gambit were both played a great deal by Karpov and against Karpov and Kasparov in the one of the World Championship matches. I don't remember which, but in one of the matches, virtually all the D4 games were either Moran or anti-Moran. So yeah, this is all theory. So often this is the gambit part. If we just go back, often White will play A4 so that the pawn can't come to B5 to defend the pawn. But White is willing to let the pawn be defended in order to gain centre. So he's playing the Queen's Gambit as a real gambit. I think amongst top chess players, the Queen's Gambit is known to be not a gambit because you can almost always get the pawn back. But here he allows the pawn to be defended by B5. But, oh, wait a minute. Has Shirov made a mistake? His knight is pinned and now it's attacked by the pawn. These things happen to us all the time. And the answer is simple. You push the pawn. If he takes with the bishop, then you take with the pawn. And then if he takes with the pawn, you take with the queen. And okay, your pawns are a bit ruined, but, you know, everything's good. So Chucky falls back. And if they play G5, then the knight isn't any longer pinned. So that's fine. In this case, with the knight on F3, there is an alternative if they play G5, and that's exactly what we see. And the alternative is to sacrifice the knight, and then you're winning the knight back because this knight is pinned and attacked twice. So Shirov supports it, and Chucky takes the knight. But you'll notice that Shirov doesn't win the pawn back, which is most useful to him. A knight pinned on F6 or a piece which is free to move. And also this pawn in some ways can act like a defensive shield for the king, like when your opponent is attacking you, as happens to us all, and takes a pawn on h7 and says check, well then you can go to h8 and hide behind the pawn. Or if they take with the bishop or pawn on f7 or f2, then you hide behind that piece, allowing that piece to be part of your defence. So it's partly that, but partly he doesn't want the knight pinned and he wants to have freedom of movement of his other pieces. So bishop to pawn to g3 to fianchetto the bishop. Wait a minute, is this a problem? He threatens to take the pawn and threatens the rook at the same time. No, not a problem. Chucky plays d5. And obviously if you take, he takes with the knight, you can't take back, or he takes with the queen and threatens the rook. And then is in a position to double up on the d file with rook to d1. So no, you can't take. But he plays queen to b6, ready to castle so that he then can take. And now he plays b6, and he's in a position to, you know, to maybe think about taking. He castles. No, he definitely can take. No, he has enough support to go to attack against that pawn. And Chucky castles so that the king defends the bishop, so that he's in a position to take the pawn on e6. You'll notice that the queen on b6 has the function also of defending the pawn on e6. So b4, the knight has got to move. So if he comes here, well, it's a bit in the way of the rook. If he comes here, then it's in the way of the bishop. If he comes here, what's the point in that? So he attacks the queen. The queen moves and attacks the knight. The knight is defended by the queen. White pushes the pawn with the idea that if he takes the pawn here, the rook then defends the knight, so the queen is free to move. And if white pushes the pawn, if black pushes the pawn, then white comes back to c3 with the knight, and it's perfectly happy there. So he takes the d pawn whilst he's got the chance. And white takes the b pawn, and black takes the b pawn. And now we have a situation where white has 4 pawns against 1 on the queen side, on the king side, and black has 4 pawns against 1 on the queen side. So yeah, it looks like white might have the forces to attack on the king side where the king isn't, and black might have the forces to attack on the queen side where the king isn't. Is it possible to win by attacking on the side of the board where the king isn't? Yes, it is. That's not what happens here. So he comes with the bishop to attack the queen. To attack the pawn on a7. And the knight comes to defend the pawn. And he says check. Yeah, sensible. Gets the queen into the game. And the rook blocks. I'm not sure that this was the best move, but the rook blocks. What? What? Queen to g7. He just puts the queen where it can be taken for a bishop. Is that right? Can it work? Well, actually, if the bishop takes, the pawn takes, the rook is then threatened, so the rook has to move, and then the knight on c5 is attacked twice and only defended once. It still seems pretty crazy given a queen for 2 pieces, but it's actually, in chess history, it's not that uncommon. There's a brilliant game by Tal against Toulouse where he sacrifices the queen for 2 pieces. I think Nesmetdinov has played a brilliant queen sacrifice of a queen for 2 pieces. It's not so terribly uncommon, but of course 2 minor pieces, 3 each, 6 points, a queen 9 points. It is a material disadvantage. Let's just take a moment and see what the analysis says about this position. .43 to black. A very, very slight advantage to black. And yeah, if he takes, even smaller advantage. If he does anything else, he's lost. I'll turn it off, because if he moves the rook, well, the bishop gets taken. If he moves the bishop, the rook gets taken. He doesn't have any choice. He has to take the queen. Pawn takes, threatens the rook, and no. He takes with the queen, forking. It takes with the knight, sorry, forking the rook and bishop. You would think he's going to get the rook out of the way, but he doesn't. The knight is only defended by the bishop, and now you cut off the defense of the knight from the bishop and attack the bishop at the same time. Is this going to work out for Chucky? Well, let's see. So he plays bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop check. Obviously, when you're threatened, you have three choices. The piece that's threatened can move. Right, it's two pieces threatened here, three pieces if you count the bishop. You can't move them all. You can block, you can't block all these attacks. You can take the attacker, yeah, you can take one of these attackers, or you can come with a stronger threat. The strongest threat is check. You have to do something about check immediately. So he has no choice but to take with the rook. And then you might think, okay, he's going to take the rook with the knight, and then he's going to end up with a knight and rook, or bishop and rook for a queen. They're worth 8 points, and the queen is worth 9. So it isn't so far from what we call theoretical material equality. And so he takes with the and now Chucky takes, but he plays the queen back. Why? Because he wants to get rid of the bishop. He wants to, if possible, play queen takes, pawn takes, and then you can't take back with the pawn because the queen would recheck. So Chucky takes with the bishop. So okay, so the knight's going to get out of there now. No, not really. It doesn't have a good square to go to at the moment. So he attacks the queen to give the knight the d6 square. Great. He plays d6 check. And then he attacks the queen and, in the same breath, if you will, attacks the pawn behind it on b4. So you can imagine queen takes pawn, rook takes pawn check, and then rook takes pawn, and you've got a rook, knight, and pawn for the queen, which is 9 points of material. Theoretical material equality. There's a problem with that line though. Of course, the rook on a1 is threatened by the queen where it is now, and on b7 as well, so it can't go that way. But he does take on b7, b4, and says check. So the rook is threatened, the knight is threatened. Logic dictates that there's only one move, and indeed that's the move he plays. Okay, so he's threatening to play rook takes rook here, and yeah, if he takes the pawn, for example, then the and says check. The knight, the back rank is weak for black, but he doesn't do any of that. He plays rook takes pawn check, and now Chucky really hasn't got a choice except to take the. Shirov hasn't got a choice except to take the knight. If he moves the king here, he loses the rook and its mate, so he has to take the knight. And Chucky takes the pawn, and now he's got two rooks worth 5 points each, 10, and an extra pawn against a queen, 9. And why are two rooks better than a queen? It's because there's two of them for a start, and they can coordinate well, and they can mate themselves against the king. It's difficult. The queen can't really mate itself. It needs the support of the king. But isn't this pass pawn here dangerous? We'll see at that white is soon able to get that. So he comes to g4 so that he can threaten to play queen d1 check, and then queen d5 check, and queen d1 and queen d5 and queen d, and get a perpetual check. So you know, that's something else to take care of. Now the rook is stopping that from playing, but he just brings the rook back so that he can double them up, or he can threaten this pawn, take it, and if the queen takes, he can then play a rook here and get the queen for the rook, and then he's 3 pawns against 1, and those are not being stopped. So there, Shirov resigned. So, and what do we learn from this? We learn that sometimes the impossible is possible on the chessboard, and you know, imagination can create beauty out of chess pieces. This is a fine example of that. Yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It helps with the algorithm. Thanks very much. Bye.